they've not only left Madeleine alone in the room, they've left 2 babies. I mean, it's a no-no. It's bang out of order. That's child abandonment. That is an offence under British statute law, under the Children's Act, I think 1984. And if you commit an offence abroad, which would be an offence back home, you could be arrested for it. So why were they not arrested for child abandonment? Now, I would be concerned if I was the senior investigating officer of the fact that the Gasper statement, for one, that there has been an indication that there could well be 1, if not more, paedophiles within that little group of the Tapas 7. This group all doing different visits to different kids. They even allowed the men to bath the other children. What adult would allow a man to bath their own infant child? Kate McCann makes some awful statement in her book about, makes a reference to Madeleine's perfect vagina. The flat had been bleached.
Because as you said, with the sniffer dogs, the only trace they had was in the McCanns' apartment where Madeleine was last seen, and in the car that they rented. Now that I have you sitting in the chair, what do you think happened to little Madeleine? The legend himself, Jon Wedger, welcome to the show.
It's a pleasure.
This episode will be based on the disappearance of Madeleine McCann. But before we go into that incredible story, if you can speak me through what you've got going on in the now and the present.
Yeah, I mean, my life's crazy because it goes in peaks and troughs. But my narrative is quite consistent and whatever I say. And I remember when I first started doing this, I said to someone, with what I say, the one thing and the topic I talk about, the one thing that those that do likewise will never prove wrong. So when I first started doing it, I did get attacked as being a conspiracy theorist, especially when I started talking about ritualistic abuse. And I started getting heavy trolling. And also I started getting attacked by certain elements within the national media. Quite esteemed journalists were classing me as dangerous for my narrative regarding satanic ritual abuse and its, its presence and the fact that this is a real and present danger. And that went on for quite some time, and they call it satanic panic. And they say what I do puts out a false narrative, and it could result in children being put into care unnecessarily. And it's a very tricky topic because the survivors of it can have very complex mental health issues. I'm not saying they're lying, but they can. Some be deluded. Some might have dissociated identity disorder, multiple personalities. So one personality will say one thing, one will say the other thing. But it's the nature of the beast because what happens to them is pure beastly, And I got sent a document through by someone in Parliament 2 weeks ago and said, John, you won't believe this. You've got to read this document, an official government document. And it's to the National Council of Chief Constables, right? And it's to all the police forces throughout Great Britain. And it is a training document on the reality of satanic ritual abuse and how they are now going to have it as part of the police training curriculum. There's going to be specialist officers that are going to be trained in how to recognise ritual abuse, and it's something that I've been pushing for really since I've started doing this, that it should be treated as an aggravating factor, a bit like when someone is assaulted and there's a connotation that it's homophobic or it's racial, it becomes an aggravating factor which ups the sentence. And I've always said that there's certain cases against children, whether it be sexual assault, rape, things like that, if they're done in a ritualistic environment, it should have its own aggravated bit on the statute books for it. And they're now doing it. So I'm thinking, wow, that's such a step forward. And a few years ago, I was asked to become a core participant, a national core participant in the UK government's independent child abuse inquiry. Scotland had their own strand of it, which sort of come to fruition a year after the rest of the UK did. And it's because there's a different judicial system up here, And the findings are all the same, just horrific how these kids have been let down. And my statement was the largest statement submitted in the UK's national inquiry. And the government just didn't want it getting out there. So the day of the trial, when I was due to give evidence at the government hearing, the government solicitors unpaginated my statement. And what that means is first page of the statement is quite obvious it's the first page. The last page is quite obvious it's the last page. But in between, if you put page 13 as page 27 and page 16 as page 9, it becomes nonsensical. And that's called unpagination. And that's what they did. So the day I'm meant to give evidence, I'm handed an unpaginated statement. It's just spiteful tricks that they do.
Moving on in the story.
Yeah.
If you could now take me into the Madeleine McCann case.
Well, the Madeleine McCann thing is so perplexing on many, many levels. And recently it made the press again because the German police have said, look, there's a body in this area in Portugal, we think it's Madeleine. And, of course, I've said they'll never find her, she's long gone. And I said, well, don't worry about it. It'll happen today. It happened, the other year, and it'll happen probably next year, that these people will come forward and they'll open this up and they'll send cadaver dogs in, but it won't be her. I mean, kids go missing all the time, and no doubt there are bodies secreted all over the place. But Madeleine's long gone, and, and the sensationalism around this one girl, the amount of money they've spent, the connectivity of the parents. And isn't it funny how the parents haven't been commenting on this? Because I think the public perception of them is so low now that they're just not going to get entertained anymore. And I'm not knocking the girl. There was a girl that came forward, a Polish girl called Julia, claiming that she was Madeleine. And she made contact with me, and I passed her on to other podcasters. But I did speak with her. She was a well-meaning, intelligent, articulate, nice individual. And from the start, I said, in my opinion, you're not Madeleine. And I said, but Julia, have you been the victim of incestual child abuse? And she said, yeah, I had. So it was my opinion that it was just a projection, and there's some ingrained issues going on upstairs. But she's a woman that is... like I said, articulate, intelligent, and holds a professional job and speaks very, very good English. But she's not. But she started coming over to the UK from Poland and basically doorstepping the McCanns. And I did warn, don't do this. It's, whatever we think of Kate McCann, she's lost a daughter. Whether she's involved in it or not, she's still lost a daughter. And, I think it's time to put it to bed. But for good.
Definitely. As I say, this is the first time I've really went right into the case, John. And there's so many inconsistencies, all the way from when she was reported missing, the investigation, the aftermath, the hush-hush, all of these things. It's so crazy. But if we can get into the case, so you're going back to like 2007 when it happened. Yeah,
so this little girl... I don't know how old she was.
She was only 3 at the time.
3 at the time, right.
A week away from her 4th birthday.
Right. So she's got 2 siblings, twins, who are little baby infants. And they're on this holiday with mum and dad and this group. They call them the Tapas 9 or whatever. I don't know, maybe the Tapas 7, whatever. So this whole extended group have gone away up to this spa resort in Portugal on the Algarve. And little girl goes missing, right? And then there's this big manhunt, and it sort of goes on to this day. Tens of millions ploughed into this by consecutive Home Secretaries, keeping the case open. And, you like you say, consistency is starting to occur, and things didn't add up from the start, really, from the start with me. And it was quite funny because a colleague of mine said... What do you notice about, when Gerry and Kate start making these public appeals? And the first thing you've got to look at, they've got media appeal. They're both attractive couple, physically fit, middle class, white professionals. They've got it all going on, they really have. And but they do, I think the day after they do this public appeal, and my colleague went, what do you notice about the mum? I went, no. Said she's got makeup on and earrings. I went, oh yeah. He said, that ain't right, is it? I went, no. Now I dealt with a case where, my background is an investigator, a career detective, and I did many years and different secondments to various units dealing with child protection, vice, and things like that. So in the sex crime genre, you have to be vetted before you go in there. You have to be psychometrically tested, and you have to undergo certain sessions with psychiatrists, right? And psychometric testing is a very clever thing, and it really basically weeds out if you have been the victim of childhood sexual abuse, and that will come out, because you can't give a balanced approach to an investigation if you have come from that. That's the theory, and there's other arguments to back that up. And you get what's known as a hero complex. Like in social, you get survivors will become social workers, or you get a lot of these groups, these paedophile hunter groups, and there's quite a large amount of them have come from the survivor community. And I'm not knocking them, I'm not here to knock them or denigrate them, but we're adults having an adult chat. But there'll be no vetting. You say, right, I want to catch these nonsense because they've ruined my life, and rightly so, and I get that. Police aren't doing it. Good, I'm behind them. But you can be unbalanced in your approach, and sometimes you see it when they arrest people. There's a lot of anger. There's a lot of demeaning as well, that they put these people down. It's not professional. And if you was to have arrested a paedophile like that, you could have got the case thrown out. And some even go on to mock the person. And when you see some of the offenders that they catch, they're clearly damaged people who are without a doubt victims themselves. It can be the real low-hanging fruit of society, and I think borderline whether or not they're mentally able to have made a decision themselves to commit a criminal act, But you can't have that in policing, and you can't have that sort of way of going about things, and especially when it comes to child protection. You have to be someone that's got quite a resilient nature, a compassionate nature, and you're going to be dealing with very, very tricky people. They're not like normal criminal. There's nothing honourable in their crime, and they're manipulators as well. So it takes quite a stoic individual. And when I worked on these units, they were good. They were very good interviewers. They were better than any of the criminal investigator interviewing units I ever dealt with. The child protection ones were the cream of the crop when it comes to interviewing. Right, very, very clever. And we were trained in such a unique way. And we were trained to ask 4 questions. Tell me, explain, describe, show. Very open questions. Right, not closed question, open. And we had to be careful with our body language. I'm from an Italian background, and we talk with our hands, the Italians. They used to say, if anyone's Italian, just put your hands under there, because I could elicit information. If you're talking to me and you're saying something which is going in the right direction, that is an encouragement. I'm leading you, gesticulating, leading, right? And kids like to acquiesce. So kids will say what they think is pleasing the adult. And so it's a very, very tight and very monitored way of interviewing, and everything. Like we got 3 cameras. It was the same as an interview suite. We would have 3 cameras, and one would be on me, one would be on a kid, and one would be a revolving camera, and it'd be make sure that I'm not. So I used to be sat like that, having these open questions, and we would look for traits in people as well. And I had to interview a woman. She was from Ethiopia, and her daughter had died, her infant daughter had died. And it was suspicious. But it was a cot death, as they call it, SUDI we call it now, sudden unexplained death of an infant, SUDI. It used to be termed cot death. And they said, you've got enough to nick the mother for manslaughter or murder, I was like, seriously? Went, yeah. It's like, oh no. And this woman had just lost the most precious thing in her life, a child. And then I had to arrest her, right, on suspicion of killing her own child. And I've never felt so much of a dog in all my life. I then had to rub pure salt into these open wounds. This woman was distraught. She was beyond grief, and it was harrowing. You could feel the pain coming out of her heart. Her heart was broken, and you could feel it. And we had to then interview her. Right, it was appalling, but it was the protocol, and it's what I had to do. So I've dealt with a woman who lost her kid, lost a kid, and I've seen the pain and the heartache and the sorrow. Did I see that in Kate McCann? No. I saw someone who was grieving. You could see there's grief. In him, you didn't see anything. With her, you can see that she has got a heart. But she's hard-nosed. She's hardened her heart. But him, there's something very, very off-putting. And now when you look at them, all these years later, you can see that she's harrowed. She hasn't aged well. That is a woman that is in a lot of trouble. And him, he looks exactly the same. It hasn't seemed to have fazed him. Should they have been arrested? Of course.
That's what I was going to ask you, John, because it's such a controversial case. But now that I have you sitting in the chair, what do you think happened to little Madeleine? Right.
So there's rumours abound, okay, that the McCanns are into a practice known as swinging. Rumours, okay? I'm not putting any fact across. I have spoken to someone who claims to have been at a party at such a venue, and they've been there, and have had politicians and prominent people, right? But I've got nothing to back that up. Evidentially, where would it go? I don't know. Criminally, well, it should be looked into, and I've told the guy speak to Operation Grange about it because I think it's important. And when you're investigating such a serious case, it's all important. Look, if you look at how someone lives, you see how they die. Right? Now, Madeleine's life, we can't really look into her life because it's unaccomplished. It's a 3-year-old. But the parents, we could definitely look into them. Would it make a difference swinging? I think so. I think so because when you've got a practice like that, a secret practice, right, it can be influential. Now, I'm going to give you an example. I had got offered a job dealing with top secret information for quite a covert part of policing. And I was very good at what they call field intelligence. So I was offered, look, there's a little job going here. And I had to undergo the highest level of vetting, security vetting. It is very, very high. It's what, if you're working anywhere near top secret information or central government or pilot or royalty and that, you'd have to go through this level of vetting. And it's so intrusive. But financially, they need to know everything about you, right? You have to account for everything, your bank statement, but also your private life. And they needed to know every single sexual partner I'd had, right? And they said, if there's something crops up on here that we later find out about, you're off. So if you find out that you've had it off with a colleague and you've mentioned it in there, that's a level. Is it relevant? Well, obviously they deem it relevant because sexuality and homosexuality and bisexuality and promiscuity have all got a leverage, right? So the woman sergeant that was running this, she said, she said, I could not get that job that you're going for. I went, all right, because I'm a lesbian. There's a lot of lesbians in the police. I said, God, that's a bit out of date saying that. She said, no. So it's a fact. A lot of homosexuals fail the vetting because of their promiscuity and their lack of, what's the words? Like with marriage. I know there's gay marriage now, but back then it was still in its early days and all that. So that trying to make something permanent, that security of tying the knot and all that. But it was really mainly down to the promiscuity element of it. And also, if you're into swinging, you have an open sexual relationship with your partner into swinging, and you'll find out that you've been on swinging websites. If they do an intrusive look into your web history and find that is one of the things you do, or dogging, you've cropped up on a dogging site, or you've been seen at a dogging site, your car's been seen there and it's linked to you. Anything like that, you will not pass vetting because it has a massive lever, right? And I can go into a lot more detail a bit later on with stuff as well. It holds a lever. And this is where sexual crimes are different to crimes of dishonesty and violence, which are the predominance in a copper's day-to-day sort of patrolling. It's usually scroty people from housing estates either fighting each other or fucking each other, to be vernacular, you know? But when it comes to sex crime, usually dealing with an emotionally broken people, and promiscuous people tend to come from abuse backgrounds, and they're emotionally broken as well. Sex can be used as a weapon more those than a loving thing, and you've got emotional immaturity as well, right? So there's a brokenness that goes with it. The thing is, because it's an emotional thing, it's not to do with poverty. It's not tied into the usual boundaries of criminality, such as poverty, neglect, living on housing estates, housing schemes, as you call them up here, things like that, which are the majority of crime. Sex crime is different. It knows no boundaries. So sex crime is a bit like Satanism, in as fact it is the most diverse thing going, right? They don't care who joins, like with Satanists, you know, they're not interested where you're from, your age group and all that, you know, your colour, anything goes. And it's the same with sex crime. It doesn't know economic boundaries, right? It doesn't know racial divides. It doesn't know financial restrictions. It knows nothing. It is a hot knife through the butt of society.
Do you think that's where we can find the truth in this case?
Yeah, definitely. I think that there's going to be a strong sexual element to this. There was the statement called the Gasper statement, where one of the people involved in this was a woman called so Gasper, and she made a statement to is it Nottinghamshire Police? Is it Nottinghamshire? They're from or Leicestershire, that's it, Leicester they're from, saying that you need to be careful with this inquiry because there's a guy called Dr. Payne that's involved, and it was Gerry's mate, this fellow called Payne. And this woman Gasper had made allegations that Payne potentially could be, you know, have a liking of young kids, and evidence that with gesticulation and things that went on in conversations between this Dr. Payne and Gerry, who they were colleagues together in this Leicester Royal Infirmary or something. I think one of them was that this Dr. Payne was sort of indicating oral sex or playing with his nipples, and does Madeleine do this? So it's totally highly inappropriate conversation to have towards a young child, you know. So that went in, and that sort of didn't really go anywhere. And then on top of that, there's a guy who's just died. What is his name? He's a statement analysis. He's a tremendous individual, and I had quite a lot of communication with him. His name will come to me in a minute, and he ran an academy in America, and he was based on, I think, on the east coast of the States, and he used to do statement analysis for law. Peter Hyatt, his name is Peter Hyatt, and he worked for law enforcement, and he would analyse the spoken word but in its written format. So he would transcribe someone's narrative, and in there he said you can pick out anomalies, and you can detect lying to a 99.6 degree. You can protect, and so when he analysed a series of statements by the McCanns, he picked out so many anomalies, and he openly said they're lying, they're both lying. He said that Kate probably comes from an abused background. She's got an inability to protect her own children, which is something that we would indicate as child protection officers. If someone has been sexually abused as a kid, there is a highly likelihood they will fail to protect their children. That's why some kids are taken into care at birth, because they know the mother might not be able to protect that kid. So they get straight in there, and the rights and wrongs, each case in its individual merit and all that, but these things do go on. And he sort of indicated that he thinks that Gerry is, you know, a pervert in basic terms. That, you know, this Peter Hyatt's words, not mine, but it was fantastic, and I would concur with so much of what he said. Now, here's my opinion, and it is my opinion, right? I think that there may well have been some sort of history going on along them lines. I don't know, but I've watched some of the videos, the home videos made and all that, and it seems a little bit creepy when they've addressed Madeleine and filmed Madeleine and things like that. They said she was a very, very hyperactive child, and she was quite loud, which might indicate that there's some sort of trauma going on with a little girl, that she's misbehaving, she's not got harmony, and that could be that she's distressed in some way. I was told that that they were medicating the child, with a sedative. Again, that could be the fact that the kid don't sleep and they need sleep or whatever. But also, if you medicate a child, do you need that kid to be lucid when things are going on? Maybe not. When it came to ritualistic abuse, kids will be drugged, right? Because of the horrors. There'll be a lot of resistance and everything else. And part of what goes on is usually sexual and torturous. So the victims and survivors of ritualistic abuse, they would be given hallucinogenic drugs. So they were away with the fairies. But also when they have memory recall, they recall rabbits and butterflies, and because they're on hallucinogens. So their testimony has got no worth. Where'd you go with it? But they had to be awake. Had to be a degree of lucidity about them because of what they were going to endure. When it comes to sexual abuse and pornography, you don't need that. You can anaesthetise them. I've spoken to survivors who have cropped up in and had to be shown pornographic magazines, child pornographic magazines, and they recognise themselves in there. And the one thing they say, but look at my body, and they're basically asleep because they've been knocked out, they've been sedated, whether they've been given Zopiclone or some sort of sleeping tablet like that, I don't know. But bear in mind, both of these were anaesthetists. So would they have had access to that sort of medication? Yep. Would they know how much to administer? Probably, yeah. And with anaesthesia, I'm no expert, but I know that you're limited to how many times you can be administered it because it has a residual effect. So, for whatever reason, now I would be concerned if I was the senior investigating officer of the fact that the Gasper statement, for one, that there has been an indication that there could well be one, if not more, paedophiles within that little group of the Tapas 7, Tapas 9, whatever the number was. That would be an alarm bell for me. Another one would be the sterling work of Peter Hyatt, who submitted, a statement and his analysis of what he did regarding that, which was with absolute credulity. I mean, this guy's a documented, almost infallible expert, forensic expert, and he said, "I'll go to court. Let them sue me." They never did. No. They never did, and his findings were they were on point, in my opinion.
But John, for the audience watching, if you were to paint like a scenario of what actually happened that day or the evening before.
So we've got all that background, and then this family have gone out to eat in an evening. Now, as a single parent of 4 kids who would go abroad with my kids, Portugal, Spain, France, they're all child friendly. You're not going to get kicked out of a restaurant for having kids. In fact, they welcome the kids in there. There was no need for them to leave them kids in there. The other thing we've got to look at is they've not only left Madeleine alone in the room, they've left 2 babies. I mean, it's a no-no. It's bang out of order. That's child abandonment. That is an offence under British statute law, under the Children's Act, I think 1984. And if you commit an offence abroad, which would be an offence back home, you could be arrested for it. So why were they not arrested for child abandonment? And they said it was common practice. And then they were allowing each other to do this circuit where they would go around and check on the kids every 15 minutes. They said, well, what's the point of that? If that would happen, we would have had to have done 3 or 4 checks as we sat here. And then when they supplied the rota of who was checking whose kid, it was so convoluted and confusing, it couldn't possibly have worked. It wasn't that one person every half hour would do all of them. No, one would do one and then do the other, and it become a bit of a mess. So it looked like there was a distraction and a confusing element put into the mix to start with. For many years, I'm not putting aspersions on any race, but I dealt with deception in respect to passport fraud. And the predominant group that used to cause a lot the passport deception, and we would arrest probably 9 times out of 10 were Nigerians, right? And when you arrested a Nigerian fraudster, it was just total confusion. They would leave you in a state where you didn't even know what your own name was, right? They were just accomplished liars. Again, I'm not calling all Nigerians that at all, but Nigerian fraudsters, they've got it down to a T. They know the score, right? They know the apple core, as we say. And it was confusing, and it had elements of that in their narrative. This group, all doing different visits to different kids. They even allowed the men to bath the other children. So one man would be allowed to bath another kid. What adult would allow a man to bath their own infant child? And why would you do it anyway? For what reason? But they tried to show this was the openness that they had. It was wrong and perverted. It stinks, right? So I think that the night that they had this meal and they said Madeleine went missing from this gap in the window, right, now we got to break this down. I think Madeleine probably died the day or 2 days before. I think she died from an accumulation of sedatives. I think that the girl, Madeleine, was probably woke up due to a tolerance of this or not enough of this sedative or whatever. I think she's done her best, been screaming and tried to find her mum in a panic, frightened, like any little kid left alone in a little prison cell of a room in a baking hot country would do, right? And I think she tried to climb up a window or something to try and see mummy and daddy. I think she's fallen. I think she's got injured. I think she suffered positional asphyxia, and I think she's suffocated through positional asphyxia. That's what I think. The flat had been bleached, right? Why would you do that? The dog, the cadaver dog, is a guy called Martin Grimes, who had the best dog ever recorded in policing history for hit rates, you know. Cadaver, trained to sniff out human, you know. They train them in quite a unique way. So they train them on pigs. So pigs are unbelievable because they've got the same build-up as a human being. So every organ in a pig will work in us, even the blood will work in us. So all this nonsense about evolution, right? You know, so Charles Darwin and Richard Attenborough, I'm not a fan of yours, right? I don't believe in it, right? But so why can't we transpose an organ from a chimp into our body? Can't, it won't work, but a pig will. And how many religions don't eat pig? Quite a lot, you know? And the smell, a cadaver dog will struggle to tell the difference between a rotten human and a rotten pig, right? So they train them on rotten pigs. Even ballistics, when they're doing ballistics shooting and ballistics testing, they shoot them on a pig because the skin has the same reaction when shot as a human body. And pigs and humans are the only two animals that suntan. They suntan, pigs and humans. But they're also body farms, so you can donate your body to science, and the bodies are buried in shallow graves and deliberately rotted, and dogs are trained on that, on humans, you know. So they do get trained on rotting humans as well. So there's these body farms. Grim, but there's these body farms. So the dog that got sent in picked up a scent. It picked up a scent of blood, right, from that child. And it picked it up in the car as well. I think that it's a genuine mistake. I looking at Kate McCann, she's generally concerned, in my opinion, about what happened. It's had an emotional toll on it. Gerry, no, can't see any remorse there. But I think it is a mistake. The perversion or suspected perversion element to one side, right, I don't think anyone intended that to happen. I think they've moved the body, they panicked, and they've got that body out, and they've all been in on it together, right? And the body has gone, I reckon it's gone into the sea. That's my opinion. You try digging in that soil in that country, it is rock hard, you know? But you've got the Atlantic coast, a voracious coast, highly tidal, not like the Med. A lot of predation in there. It's not overfished. It's rocky. So it's not going to be trawled. So a weighted down body in that water is not going to last long. You know, the lobsters, the prawns, the bottom feeders will eat it. The trawlermen, they ain't going to go that far. And the sports divers, you know, you've just got to get, you know, they're going for depths of divers. You've only got to get somewhere which won't be appealing to the diving fraternity. Maybe a local boaty person would know exactly where to go.
Because as you said, with the sniffer dogs, the only trace they had was in the McCanns' apartment where Madeleine was last seen, and in the car that they rented. So it kind of paints its own picture.
Yeah, and it picked up, and these dogs don't lie. So they've gone out their way to discredit the dog handler. Kate McCann makes some awful statement in her book about, makes a reference to Madeleine's perfect vagina. I mean, why would you even do that, you know? It's like one of my boys dying and I make a comment about his perfect little winkle. I mean, you would never put the two together. It's strange because one of the things when you used to interview people that were believed involved in murders and stuff like that, one of the things was if people, when they're talking about extreme trauma, being on in a trauma scene or being involved in the trauma, and they start talking about food, or they want to go and eat or something like that, it's a massive alarm bell. It's a massive figure. There was one guy I can recall was talking about a murder, and he remembered the day because he remembered what he had to eat that day. Well, that was an alarm bell straight away, because why would you do that? Why would you associate food and trauma? They don't go together. So if trauma occurs, the last thing you do is eat. You might have a cup of tea and a cigarette to calm yourself, but you don't eat. And it's the last thing for your mind. So when you put food and that together with trauma, you know you might, because what it is, it's a base level thing. So that guy Maslow said the hierarchical of needs, and at the base level is food and shelter. Higher up is the need to be belonging to a community and have something further on in life. But that's once you're established, you want them things. Initially, you need food and shelter. So when people are caught up in trauma and they still think about food and shelter, it's what an animal would do. It's base level emotion. And it shows you're dealing with someone with a very base level emotion. So for her to then mention about a child sex organ, it's odd. Very, very odd. It would be an alarm bell for me if I was looking at it, thinking, why she mentioned that? I would explore that to its nth degree, why it mentioned your child's vagina.
Because there was no evidence of an abduction then, was there?
No, then when we look at the crime scene, so they're saying that a transient child snatching paedophile has taken that child out via this open window. Well, if you look at that, so you then got to climb through that window, you've got to snatch a child, they're saying wasn't sedated or anything like that, who's going to kick off, scream and do everything, going to be frightened, panicking, and then you've got to get them back through the window that you've just about secreted yourself through. How's that going to work? It isn't. And then you've got to make your way then through the streets and everything else of a popular tourist resort and not be seen. What are the chances of that happening? It goes into, I don't know, I'm not a statistician, you know. So they're saying that this is what we should be looking at. This guy that's stolen happened to come across it, gone through and picked a time when this bizarre convoluted 15-minute checking up on kids thing's gone on. So the window of opportunity, the chances and all that, it makes it more infinite, doesn't it, that this actually did occur. So there's that scenario. Well, there's a thing in policing that the simplest explanation is usually a correct one. Well, what if they've overdosed a kid and it's fallen and it's got positional asphyxia and died? Well, it sort of makes sense. It does make sense. I think they then utilise that time to totally scrub that to a clinical standard, that room, right? So there's nothing left, evidentially tangible evidence of that at all. They then planned to a very intellectual degree about what to do, staged this thing the next day. They've got the solace of knowing that the child has been disposed of, so that's not going to be found, right? And then the rest of it, they'll just have to deal with it as it happens. And then they go and get this guy in who becomes their spokesperson. Can't remember his name now, and he's quite a dogmatic media guru who basically is a bit like when we was in the Crown Courts with the defence barristers, people like Michael Mansfield, whose job is just to discredit anyone who comes their way. You just got to discredit people, you know, and then you discredit the information that comes through them, you know. And this is what this, can't remember his name now. It's on the back of my tongue. And then all of a sudden they get the pontiff involved, you know. They rely on deity worship to bolster up their story as God is my witness. We used to get that with the Nigerian deception guys. The Bible would come out in the name of Jesus. No, you know. Wow, I go to church, I do this. Always bring deity worship in to take it to that higher level. So they've got the Pope involved. Then they've got Gordon Brown involved, which is odd as well, because Gordon Brown's brother, I've heard, was connected to Thomas Hamilton. That was a Dunblane murder. So
and also Gerry stayed in the same street as Gordon's brother, is that right? Or Gordon Brown himself?
Yeah, Peter Brown. And I was told that Peter Brown knew the McCanns anyway as well. So that connection got made quite straightforward. And the millions that has been spent on it. And so the average man hour spent on a child, I did some research into this, it's something like 11 hours. And the average amount of money, police resources, is about £1,700, right, on investigating a missing child, right? They've had 17 million, something like that. The other thing is the police, the judicial police in Portugal, they basically said that we think the parents are guilty, all right? So they think the parents were guilty of neglect and of the death of their child. And they arrested them because that's what they genuinely believed, which is what I genuinely believed. The head of the judicial police, Concalves, wrote a book about it. They tried to sue him and he went and wrote another book about it. Is that really the actions of a man who made it? Why would you make it up? What is, look, what you've got to look at with crime, you've got to look at who benefits. Where is the benefit of the head of the police judicial, or whatever it's termed, in Portugal, who's got the national and global media up his arse? What's the point of him lying? There is no benefit. That would be the most suicidal, ridiculous thing ever, to stitch them up. And they said there was no roadblocks put in place. Well, of course there weren't, because there was no need to. There was no need to. He knew what happened. And there may well have been intelligence that done. There was also stuff about there was, I don't know, I think there was in the log, there was concerns about these kids being left and things like that. So there was evidence pointing to the fact that there was child abandonment going on here on a regular basis, right? So they've just exploited and bullied. That's what they've done, is bullied absolutely everyone. Now, the British police get involved, right? What the effing hell has it got to do with the British police? They have no jurisdiction there. The only involvement they should have had was coming over and arresting Kate and Gerry for child abandonment under the provisions of the Children's Act, which is what they should have done. They should have been nicked by the British police. They've gone out there and they've taken their sniffer dogs, they've taken everything. Why? It's got nothing to do with them. They have no jurisdiction. And the policing is not compatible. Over there, it's called a Napoleonic system. You're guilty, you've got to prove innocence. Over here, the burden of proof is the flip side of it. There's a presumption of innocence in this country. In Europe, they have Napoleonic law, right? In the Commonwealth, we have common law, God's law, right? Harm, loss and nuisance with the presumption of innocence. That's what we have. So it had absolutely nothing to do with them. And then we got to look at, if you've been on, it's called Operation Grange. Right, it's been running for what, I don't know, 18 years or something like that. What have they proven? Nothing. Nothing. They've had millions and millions sent, nothing. Now, here's the thing. So when I was on child protection, Vice, right, I dealt with kids that were from care homes that were being pimped out. Grooming gangs, as we say. No Kashmiri cab drivers involved. These were Jamaicans, these were Lithuanians, these were English, these were Albanian, these were Kosovan, these were as diverse as London's diverse, is a diversity of the suspects and the victims. They were just equally as diverse, boys and girls of every single colour, right? So, you know, that was no, I've lost my point a little bit here.
You spoke to me about something, sorry to interrupt, John, and it was, let me get this right, geographical profiling.
Yeah.
I don't know if that comes into the grooming gang thing.
I'll come on to that in a minute because it's interesting. But when we just look at what's going, going back to my point. So when I was on Vice, there would be cases coming in to do with brothels, and the Proceeds of Crime Act to come in. And there was a lot of money to be recouped from taking assets of brothel keepers, which made a lot of money. And the same with these nail bars. They go on about these Turkish barbers now, but nail bars. But a lot of them were run from the proceeds of a lot of the Vietnamese and the Chinese sex trade. So people go about funding criminality. Well, I'm telling women, don't go and get your nails done in these nail bars, because when I was in the police, they were the way of laundering money from the sex trade. And there was a lot of exploitation in that sex trade, but they loved their nails done, so hey-ho. But there was money we take back. So when it come to the brothels, officers were being dispatched to go out there and seize property all over the world. So they could be going to Cyprus, they could be going to Thailand and to all these places. And when you go abroad with the police, especially if you go somewhere hot, you can get a hot clothing allowance, because you're going to have to change your wardrobe. So you can go and buy shorts and that. You get $110 a day expenses. And back then you would fly out business class because you was on business, and that would all be paid for, and put in a comfortable hotel because you've got to work. So if you're going out to Thailand, well, you're getting a jolly out, a piss up on the taxpayer, right? Would you want to go there? Of course you would, right? So Praia da Luz, a beautiful spa resort, 5-star, all that. Is it nice to go there? I would have thought so. Are you going to be there for a protracted period? I would have thought so. Would you be spending any of your money? No, you're not. Whereas with me, my kids came from council estates, so I'd go in, someone would say, right, can someone got the passport? You have to have your passport at work. You have to have it in your drawer, right? You go to Heathrow, you're on your way to Thailand. Oh, brilliant, off you go. And it's someone else will be sent out to another country, and they say, John, you're going to Peckham, you're going to Bethnal Green, because that's where the kids' homes were. So there's no glamour in it either, right? So there's no glamour in going to these. So all these kids that have gone missing, young girls, of which there's a lot of them, there's no mileage in going around these housing estates in a northern town. Or, I'll give an example. The little girl, Mary Boyle, who went missing in Donegal. They call her the Irish Madeleine McCann. Another huge cover-up. And again, the girl was sexually abused and murdered. That's the opinion.
Did they never get her body either?
No. And what were they doing? They might have done, but where's the glamour there? In Donegal, where it rains 3 days out of 5, peat bogs and rocky outcrops and all that. Well, there's no glamour there, is there? But if the little kid went missing in St Kitts or Antigua or somewhere like that, there'd be people clambering over going on that investigation.
What age was that wee girl?
I think she was about 6, 7, like that. And then we got Leslie Mulseed, another girl that went missing in West Yorkshire, and the police stitched up a guy that was retarded called Stefan Kitschko, and the officer that deliberately screwed that case up, in my opinion, they moved him over to Yorkshire, from West Yorkshire over to East Yorkshire, and into what they call the ridings, and he went on to screw up the Ripper inquiry, Yorkshire Ripper inquiry, of which has been a real scrutinisation of how much that they missed who really was doing it. And of course up here you had Moira Anderson that went missing from Coatbridge, another huge cover-up, with very sinister undertones, the sex abuse and the murder of children. What makes this any different? Well, the fact is it was done in a beautiful place. So whoever's running it, if you've got on that team, you're pretty much on your first day told, make sure you've got some nice shorts, because you're going to be working in a 5-star resort. And then once a sighting of Madeleine comes up, say in Morocco, off they go out to Morocco. Off they go out to it, They'll be very selective where they went, and their money was there to do it. So it was just, in my opinion, a jolly out and a cover-up, because these were connected people. These are very, very connected people. This was seeing connectivity, and it's working. And they're always going about Freemasons, looking out for each other and all that. Well, maybe this is a version of how that works with the McCanns. It stinks. I don't think they've got to look further than mother and father. And like the police in Portugal said, well, why are you arresting all these people? We arrested the ones who did it. You lot just have to prove it.
Do you think they'll ever get to the truth or get justice?
No. And I think anyone who just follows this, because say you've got this girl Julia who's now in prison for harassing Kate McCann, and I warned her, don't do it. Don't do it. These people are, they're vexated. They're litigious. You don't go near them. Like wasps, they're going to sting you. But she didn't listen. She went out there, and of course she's banged up now for harassment. And last you see of her. Now there's a girl in America who claims she's Madeleine McCann. Oh, it's a nonsense. Madeleine's dead. Madeleine died probably 2 days before officially was reported missing. A body, it's nothing now.
Was there ever who reported the last sighting? 'Cause it's crazy. It's a crazy story.
I think it was in the hotel. And all round, but they've milked it. They've really milked it, those two. And again, what's that? Crying in public. If you're crying, you're lying. That's what you used to say. If you're crying, you're lying. In public, sitting there, it's all a nonsense. It's all a pantomime. And then of course they've got this spin doctor guru came in and aggressively challenged anyone who went outside the narrative. And there was even an ex-detective come on board, and he's always on these programmes gobbing off about his theory. He gets on a lot of national media. The bloke's an idiot. And he was siding with the McCanns, saying, I believe the McCanns. Well, it just goes to show he's bought and paid for himself as well then, isn't it? Because I think any good detective will realise what happened there. And any good detective will realise that fingers point towards the parents, not away from them. But this idiot's going on about,
So the Portuguese police actually did arrest him?
Yeah, they did nick him, yeah.
And then
they were suspects, yeah.
The British authorities?
Yeah, they just interfered. At the same time that happened, a little girl in a northern town called Shannon Matthews went missing. And Shannon was from an impoverished, feckless, background. Her mother was an idiot, and her stepdad was a paedophile. He got convicted of a child porn offence. And I can always remember they were interviewing Shannon's mum, and she said, "Oh, she's been tooken. She's been tooken." Tooken. And they hid the kid under the bed, didn't they? They hid her in the loft and under the bed.
I remember that story.
Just to claim,
But they were getting money or something. It was
just idiots. But
was that a few days the kid was missing?
Yeah.
Was it not in the loft? The police went up and found her or something?
Yeah. They found she was hiding all around the house, and when they went round there, they seized a computer, and that her partner had been looking at child porn, and but it was done and dealt with quickly. And the police sort of got to the truth. Well, why didn't they get to the truth with it? It's just been milked, and it's the money they ploughed into it, and you can offset that against all the other missing kids cases, and it's really weird when you look into it, right? There's always a pattern, and so you had these cases like I mentioned of Leslie Mulseed and Moira Anderson. So Moira Anderson goes missing, and it gets reported to the police, and it was. The father, is it something, Alistair Garstang? He was a bus driver, and the daughter of this Alistair has written a book about Moira Anderson, just saying, like, my dad in his deathbed admitted to killing Moira Anderson, and he was part of a bigger paedophile group. And at the same time, we had Fred West up there, and there was rumours there was police officers involved. And the narrative that came out of the police was that Moira has probably got on a bus, because it was in the winter she went missing, probably got on a bus and gone down to London to see the lights. She lived in Coatbridge. She was a little girl. It's just unbelievable. There was a case in Belgium. 2 little kids that were missing were murdered by a paedophile. And when it went to the police, they said, look, we need to find these 2 little kids. They said, oh no, they just probably built a camp, and it was like -20 in a rural setting. And they went, well, what do you mean build a camp? They're going to starve. I went, well, there's plenty of potatoes in the field. They could eat a raw potato. And that was the police's response. It was imbecilic. And then when you had Leslie Mulseed, the same thing, went missing, nothing to see.
Where was that one, John?
And that was a girl in West Yorkshire. And she was found with multiple stab wounds in her back. I generally say that it was ritualistic, because it was up on the moors at the time when the Moors murders were happening. It was there's a woman who's written a book, and her parents were both involved in satanic ritual abuse, and she always said that her father knew Leslie Mulseed, and she concurs with me that this was a ritualistic murder, stabbed in the back. But they stitched up a bloke called Stefan Kitschko, who was retarded. He had the IQ of a little kid.
This is what they do.
Yeah, this is what they do, and we see that again, like with Jill Dando and things like that, stitching up special needs people. Seen so many of it, and police doggedly going for it. Time and time again, we see this.
So you mentioned Moore's murder there.
Yeah.
What's your take on that with Myra Hindley? And what was the name of our partner
Ian
again?
Brady.
He was Scottish.
Yeah. Yeah, again, you've got to look at these people. He'd come from a very troubled background. Abuse, there's a lot of abuse there. His mother had brought him up, and he was a petty criminal and things like that. So he was, he was a screwed up man. The same thing happens with these people. You see that there's always traits of abuse in the past. And when you get multiple kids going missing, I tend to incline that they may be part of a bigger thing, such as a cult, such as a procurement of children to order for these cults, for blood rituals, Of course, I would get harangued and belittled for this, a little while back, but now it's come out in an official report that this has been going on. And these satanic groups have been doing this sort of thing. So you see the same traits, same as Fred and Rosemary West. Many, many, many victims have gone missing through them. There was a guy called Brian Lunn Fields, an ex-Royal Marine, and wherever he went, kids went missing, and he would travel around the country. Kids went missing. He was connected to a group called the Dirty Dozen, which was run by an infamous murderer, child murderer called Sidney Cook. Sidney Cook, who murdered a kid called Jason Swift, and again, Cook and co, they believed to have murdered many, many young kids in sadistic sex parties. So that these kids are maybe procured for sex parties, for ritualistic stuff, whatever. I've got a statement provided by a charity, and it was done by a street prostitute, and it was done with an appropriate adult in the presence. It's a legal statement, and it's this crack-raddled heroin addict prostitute was being paid £2,000 by a drug dealer. This was in central London, in the Waterloo area, central London. She was told, don't go using condoms, because a lot of the punters, they make them wear condoms because of the disease. But she said, no, don't, get pregnant and we'll give you £2,000 for the baby. So she was getting pregnant and then selling the baby. And she said, well, I knew where it went. It was going for ritualistic, abuse, for sacrifice. And they told her that. And she was going to a special clinic, taking the baby, it was handed straight over to this guy. I don't know how much he got for it, but it'd be a lot of money. And again, we said, I've spoken to survivors of satanic ritual abuse who go on about babies. I've spoken to 3 women who've actually murdered babies, stabbed them. But one told me she was made to stab 6 children in a row that were under a cloth on a table in a big film studio just outside of London. There was a ritual held in there, but she was only 6 years old. And it's part of the conspiracy of silence. And they got the knife, and she said it was like a stiletto used to open letters, and they sharpened it. And there were little girls, and she was made to stab them in the vagina, the little girls. One woman, she's an author now, and she was made to stab a child. She said there was a cloth and it was wriggling in this ritual, and they pulled it out and there was a child. And they dressed her in a communion dress, and she was given a knife, and she was told to cut the baby's throat, and she didn't do it because she didn't want to hurt the baby. She was only a little kid. She was again about 6, 7 years old, and to punish her, they put a hot poker up her anus, and then made her do it. And then afterwards, there was an orgy, One woman told me of a little boy who had his left arm cut off in a ritual. She remembers watching it, and she named the boy. She said, "I know who it is." She said, "He's a lad called Brian McDermott," and he went missing officially, I think in the 70s in Belfast. He was connected to the Kincora Children's Home. There was 5 boys went missing from there, and his body was found in the River Lagan, and it was dismembered. Right? She said they cut. I think they cut his head off, but she said he'll have his left arm missing because the left side is the devil's side. In Ireland, they used to put children in care homes for being left-handed.
I'm left-handed, John.
Yeah, back in the day, there's a woman who works in a chip shop near me. She's an older girl, and she was put in a kids' home for being left-handed.
That's crazy.
And endured terrible abuse. The nuns would cane her and make her right. She many people have told me their hatred of nuns. Most wicked of people, you know. So this kid, Brian, was found with a dismembered body in a sack, and they went and arrested his brother, and they said his brother had done it because they'd had an argument, and Brian had thrown a stick at his brother or something, so his brother decided out of revenge to kill him and dismember him. I mean, it's ludicrous. And his brother was only a couple of years older than him. How would he have the intelligence, the knowledge, the skill set to dismember a body and then throw it into a tidal heavy... have you ever been to the River Lagan? It flows like a monster. It's a fast-flowing... You know, there's no way a little kid did that. And they tried to stitch his brother up with that. And I took the information to the national press in Belfast, and I met with a journalist. He said, yeah, the body was dismembered, but they're not telling us how. And when we took the information to the police service, because I'll pass it all over, they said, yeah, the left arm was missing, which tied in with what I was said. There was a guy called Colin Wallace. He was an intelligence officer for the British Army. And he was part of a unit that would discredit news sources and things like that during the troubled times in Belfast. And he was more of a misinformation guru. And they started getting information about ritualistic killings. And when Brian McDermott's body was found out, the information that came through from a source was that this is a ritualistic murder. And it officially went down by the RUC, the Royal Ulster Constabulary, as a ritualistic murder. And this unit was sent in to discredit that. And they were then sent out to mock up these fake satanic sites all over Belfast to show it was like kids involved in like rock and roll and satanic heavy metal. He said, we just made a mockery of, you know, kick over a gravestone, draw a pentagram, just to take the heat away from this murder. And because this guy was speaking out, he got imprisoned for a murder he didn't commit. He's called The Man Who Knew Too Much. It's a really interesting documentary. But he just said about the cover-ups, and it was all to do with the children's homes.
Is that on YouTube, John?
Yeah. Colin Wallace, The Man Who Knew Too Much.
I think I'll be watching that.
Yeah, it's brilliant. But again, it's to do with children, because he expressed concerns about these kids that were going missing from the kids' homes in Kincora, and the people that were involved in it, establishment figures. So it can take it to a very sinister level, and when it does start involving ritualistic abuse, people shut off. They shut off with child abuse anyway, because they don't want to talk about it. But ritualistic abuse, it's like, oh, no, don't go there. And then you get terribly, terribly ridiculed and trolled, you know. So it's... But now, like I said, there is a document that's come out now from central government to police forces, and they are going to start training officers in recognising ritualistic sites. And it needs to be done, because America does it. America has an occult crimes unit, the NYPD. It's got a brilliant unit. It was run by a fellow called Ralph Sarchi, and there's a film called Deliver Us From Evil. And he teamed up with an exorcist, a bloke called Malachi Martin, who was from County Kerry. And if there was a bizarre murder that had some sort of ritualistic connotation, these two would be brought in. And they made a film about it. It's a Netflix film, Deliver Us From Evil. It's all about this New York detective, Ralph Sarchi. In South Africa, they've got the Occult Crimes Unit, run by a guy called Cobus Yonka. and it's real. And there's two criteria. If you have to join an occult crimes team, you have to be a murder squad detective, and you have to be a committed Christian. And it's really weird. And I said, but why? And I said, if you're not grounded, in Christ, you don't last 5 minutes, because you're dealing with the occult. And they take it very, very seriously over there. It's a very real thing. Italy's got an occult crimes unit, but the UK hasn't. And we're ancient lands. And there's probably untold amount of missing kids and everything else that have succumbed to ritualistic or perverted sexual deviancy. Loads. So when you get the multiple ones, I always think there's more to it. There's more to it. It's organised and everything else. But geographical profiling, as you mentioned a little bit earlier, is a fascinating topic. What you got to do as investigators, you never look at what you haven't got. You always look at what you have got. And it's all there in front of you, right? Whether it comes from interviewing is a very, very important thing. How people behave is incredibly important. You start looking, the devil's in the detail. You look at the money, like Kate McCann wearing makeup. Come on now, if one of your children dies, mate, I'll be in the bottom of a bottle and I'm staying there.
Searching everywhere.
Drinking myself in there, you know what I mean? There's no way you will get a sober me for a long time. Yeah, of course you'll be out there day in, day out. You would never stop. It would never stop. It'd be relentless.
Unless you knew.
Unless you knew, and then you would give up. Or unless you was involved, then you would give up. But you would never stop. One of my kids failed to come home once. Oh, man, I've never known despair like it. Despair. He did come home late, and, relief combined with anger and fear, but it was the most wretched feeling. So to lose a child, and you do see it with these parents who've lost children, it kills them. It will kill them. Like Keith Bennett's mum and people like that, you see them, they're distraught. And the relationships break up, and, the alcoholism creeps in and all sorts, How do you sleep knowing that your kid could be out there? That glimmer of hope that they are out there, that they're trying to get home to mum and to dad. And
well, they say that's worse when they're missing.
Yeah.
And if you don't know what's happened.
Yeah.
That constant torture.
Well, even when your dog runs off.
Exactly.
That's bad enough. The truth is the truth. And when someone's speaking the truth, there's a power in it. There's a resonance in it. There was a young girl who'd come to me as a victim, and she'd been raped and badly abused over many years by her mother's boyfriend. Statistically, we got to look at this is where it occurs in the home. It's a very sobering and harrowing stat that 8% of the abuse is in home, and step parents do equate for a lot of the abuse. And and because of the society we live in, it will affect a lot of people that are listening to this. They will have that reality come into it. And anyway, this girl, her mum was away with affairs. She gets in with this fella, and he decides then because he's a pervert, paedophile, he's going to abuse her and her sister. And she was about 7 or 8 when it started. Her sister was a year younger. Her sister wasn't as intelligent as her, so her sister got abused worse. Right, and again, it shows a cowardly nature of these people. But the girl, years later, she decides she's going to speak out, and she goes to the police. She comes to me, we interview her. He gets arrested, and he goes before a court, and he's doing his best to worm his way out of it. And because she gets given these provisions where she can give evidence on video link, right? Because we interview them in this setting. We don't take statements with the kids. We interview them in this setting. So how we elicit the evidence is done freely, and everyone can see how we've got the information, right? Nothing's hidden, because we don't want these people to get off with it, right? And we don't want to coerce them. But she's afforded this where she can be cross-examined via a video link. And she said, John, I don't want to do that. I want to go like you do in that court. I want to stand there like on the telly, like I've seen in the telly. I went, yeah, but you do it from this room. She went, no, I want to look him in the eye. I went, good on you. So I went up to my barrister. I said, listen, she don't want her special measures. She wants to go in and look him in the eye. She went, you serious? I went, yeah. I went, wow, let's do it then. Sure she's up for it? I went, yeah, she's up for it. She goes in there. He's got this barrister who's very dogged and, doing his best to discredit this girl. And she just points and she said, he raped me. He raped me. He raped me when I was a little kid. I remember it. And there was nothing I could do.
The truth.
It was the truth.
The power in it.
It had absolute power. It was total absolute. It destroyed. There was nothing I could do. Nothing I could do. And that was it. And that, because it was the truth. And once you've got the truth in your side, it don't need protecting. They say stand up for it. No, you never stand up for the truth. It's a lie and it don't need protection. It stands on its own. The truth stands on its own. And that's what they don't want. That's why they have to try and distort the truth. They have to try and rubbish the truth. They try and avoid anyone telling the truth. That's why they won't. That's why they wouldn't call Paul Burrell to give evidence at Diana inquiry, because he'd have told the truth. And he didn't want the truth getting out, We've had these inquiries, Diana inquiry, having an inquiry saying it was an accident. Oh, come on. Oh, come on. They murdered that poor woman. That's it. She even told him. She told him, my husband's planning on having me murdered. Game over, right? They couldn't control her. So look at John F. Kennedy. 80% of the American population don't believe the official narrative. They shouldn't believe it because it's a lie. They shot that man in the face, in the head, and it goes as a stark warning. Don't you mess with us. And they do the same to us whistleblowers. They try and destroy us publicly, humiliate us, and make sure we never get up. They do it on purpose.
But it shows you the strength of you, John, being that individual who's walked that walk.
Yeah.
And that experience of being like enemy of the state, as you call it. It must be very difficult.
Yeah, it's very difficult. But then all of a sudden it gets corroborated. And some other copper stands up and says, actually, it happened to me. And you're like, yes. With me was the one was a guy called Lenny Harper. With the grooming gangs, we hear the detective Maggie Oliver. She's always on the I know her. She's a good girl, but she's not the only one. Right? They need to start listening to others. Right? And one is Lenny Harper. And what he uncovered in the states of Jersey, with the kids home there, where kids were being tortured and murdered for sex parties involving people high up in the establishment. And they went out their way to destroy Lenny Harper. There was a guy called Mike Veal, a chief constable. Well, you never get that rank coming up, speaking out, but he did. And he spoke out about Ted Heath, our Prime Minister, being, a rapist of young boys and a person involved in satanic abuse. He said it on Sky News. They destroyed him because he said the truth. The establishment don't want the truth. They can't handle the truth. They don't want it. And people refuse to accept it. It's called idolatry, right? They have a need to idolise, right? And it might be a footballer. It might be an actor. It might be a singer. Well, what keeps these people in positions where they're always in the top this, top that, right? They've sold out. They've sold out. Someone said to me, I did one of these interviews, they said, oh, look, they're going after Puff Daddy and P. Diddy. I can't stand these stupid names. Sean Combs, goofy, ugly pervert, isn't he? They've gone after him and it's all going to come out. No, it ain't. It ain't coming out. Ain't nothing coming out. What will happen is what they always do. It's an algorithm. They do an inquiry. The FBI is no different to us, to our CID. The NCA, whatever it might be, they go in there, it's all, we're going to deal with this, we're going to smash this, we're going to this, right? They take ownership, someone gets arrested, they're put on bail, they might be remanded, and then there's a trade done, then there's a deal done. And if they know any information, it will reflect in their sentencing. And look at Sean Combs, he's got the most minor, lenient, it'll be classed as time served in prison, and he'll be out. And if they are too big, to handle, they'll kill him. Look, Epstein didn't kill himself. I think everyone is quite happy with that. Is the truth. Was he involved? Of course he was involved. His island was occultic. It was a bizarre playground. It probably catered for a lot of things going on in that place. And when you're on an island, where are you going to go? You ain't going to go anywhere. You're stuck, aren't you? You're surrounded by sea.
You said that it's the most perfect place to dispose of bodies as well.
Yeah, the sea. The sea. Once you're in there, that's it. It'll be predated, and you've just got to cut it up, throw it in. It's gone. It's gone, and the sea will erode it. You know, just the kinetic action of the sea, and that the bone ain't going to last long. It ain't. It's going to go. Every little morsel, DNA is destroyed when it's in touch with water. You've only got to go as long as you're not get a rocky bit of land. You can't trawl it. The last thing you want is a limb cropping up in a, you know, in a trawlerman's net. But you just do it where an area where it's rocky, and you ain't going to get that. They can't trawl on a rocky shore, you know. And then he hangs himself in a cell while the CCTV is out and all that. Oh, come on.
The guards are fell asleep. I've heard tons of different stories.
But look, there is massive parallels to be drawn between Fred West, his lifestyle and his demise. It's a similar thing. He's just a Poundland version of Jeffrey Epstein. That's all he is. Procurer of children for sex parties and ritualistic purposes. And that was their stuff, right? And they knew too much. They were a huge risk. You know, what do you think the police do, you know, when the Brinksmat robbery, right? The weak link is the inside man. The straight goer who's been paid a few quid to let him in. You know, he's got to be disposed of. Because they did it with that big heist in American history, wasn't it? The one in the airport. Lufthansa one. You know, they had to kill everyone because they were going to grass them up.
That was Jimmy Buck.
Yeah. And that Jimmy Buck, look at him. He came from terrible child abuse. He was in kids' homes.
That's right.
So it's a very angry, aggressive, dangerous, psychopathic man. And you'll see the same pattern with these people. Fred West, very, very damaged individual. Him and his wife were just experts at procuring young children. They got involved with the local police. They had a bar in the house called the Voodoo Bar. She would entertain a lot of black guys. I spoke to a Jamaican guy that used to go around there and shag her, and he said there's always coppers in the house. Get them on board. There was rumours there was coppers having it off with Fred Rose West, and once you've got the silence then, haven't you? You know, and then if there are people that are perverted and like to do swinging and things like that, again the same thing. Get them in on it.
What happened to her? Is she still alive?
She's dying, isn't she? She's on her way out, but she'll never give anything up because she's evil and she's just a control freak. So it's their thing, isn't it? It's their last bit of control that they have, that they know where their bodies are.
That's it.
But they're going to hell. They're going to hell. But his demise is the same. You've got to look at after a while you see the patterns. You see the patterns, and that's why you can predict it. It's no different to people like John McCririck when he does with the racing. He sees patterns in the horses. He knows which one's going to come in. He sees it. And these patterns, these algorithms reoccur. And when you're dealing with people are creatures of habit. And, you know, it's their thing. It's their thing. That the dangerous ones are when they've been heavily involved and they've turned their lives around. And they say, right, do you know what, I'm not doing this anymore. That's when they're a real danger. A real danger.
Because they'll expose everything.
They want to purge themselves and speak out. And they say that this is what happens, you know.
There's so many people silenced, especially in America, Hollywood, as you said, that type of scene.
Yeah.
It's crazy. There's a film that's called Kill the Messenger. I can't mind his name, but they said that he committed suicide and he shot himself twice in the head. And he was exposing the CIA and all their corruption with the drugs and stuff. But the name will come back to me, John.
Well, there was a case in Belfast, and it was through the procurement courts. And you've got to look at these things as well. And there was a judge there, there was a group of judges that were looking into people that had special needs, that had inherited property. And they were putting them as wards of court, making them, you know, the state can then take their decision-making, making counter-signatories. And they were basically fleecing these, you know, people with Down syndrome and special needs of their properties, or people with dementia. And they were procuring all the property for themselves. And one guy found out about it, and he was about to blow the whistle. And again, I think it was in the River Lagan in Belfast. He was found with his brains blown out, right? And they said it was suicide. But the gun was found half a mile down the river. So the coroner said, I know exactly what happened. He shot himself in the head. The gun's fallen out his hand, landed on a bit of wood, and it's floated down the river and it's deposited itself on that bank. And that was seen as an acceptable, explanation of what went on. And that was it, case closed. It's an insult to intelligence. But you see the same things when the crap they come out with.
It's always a great honour sitting with you, John, listening to your stories, your experience, your great wisdom. But before we finish up on this episode, if there's another message you can send out to the audience watching, now's the time.
Yeah, I always say the same thing, that I come across as a position as someone who wants to work on behalf of the vulnerable. I've dedicated my life and my working career to doing it, and I'm now doing it in my retirement years, a voice for the voiceless. And I'm just saying to the victims and survivors, you hold the power, right? It's not your shame to carry. You didn't choose this. They did it to you. Stand up and speak out. Now's the time, more than any, stand up and speak out. I want to call out to the paedophiles who have done this. Stop doing it. Stop it. It was done to you. It weren't right. And now you're doing it to others. You must stop it. And you must go to the police and tell the police everything you've done and all those involved with you. That's what I tell you to do. Right? And redeem yourself. Put right what you've put wrong. Right? And again, to the other group, those involved in ritualistic abuse, stop it, because the one you're serving is a liar. He will abandon you and he will strip you of everything, and what you're doing is wrong. It's destructive and it destroys. Pack it in now. Go to Jesus, call it a day. And again, grass everyone up that's doing it. This is the only way we're going to get through this, is to be like supergrasses, grass people up. It's perverted, it's wrong. That's allowed in the criminal world. And all this criminal code of conduct, I think it's all nonsense anyway. I think the whole criminal thing is disruptive. We've got laws in for a reason, to protect decent, vulnerable people. The only way is the straight way, but it's never too late. Turn your life around. And I want to speak to those that listen to what we say and it triggers them and all that. We do it because the world needs to know what you went through. And your life's precious and you are loved, Suicide is not an option. It's not an option. It's one of the biggest killers of young men in America, and it's getting like this over here. It's getting bad, and we need to do a lot more to prevent suicide. There needs to be a lot more help, especially to young men, because they're the main target, for this horrible situation, So I call out to them, you're loved, don't do it. You've got value, your life's got worth, God bless all victims and survivors.
Great message, John. I want to thank you so much for coming on the show.
Absolute pleasure.
It's always a great honour to see you.
A pot of tea.
Yes, you're always well looked after. Yeah. But thanks again, John, and I'm sure we'll see you again very soon. Shake my hand.
Oh, yeah. God bless.
Thank you, John. Take care.